Labor Day weekend of 2008 was rather unique for Kings Island. And one of the reasons is that the hit king, Pete Rose, came and met the ride king, Don Helbig. Hello, everybody. Alongside the ride king, Don Helbig, I'm Ryan Sir, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans, because that's who we are, and that's who we care about.
Yeah, I remember this weekend like it was the back of my hand. And we mentioned Pete Rose at the top of the show, but there was a lot going on, wasn't there?
There was a lot going on that weekend. Pete Rose came in with George Foster, members of the Big Red Machine from the 1970s. There was an appearance by some of the Brady Bunch actors. It was the 35th anniversary of the Cincinnati Kids episode airing, and Carmen Electra, who had been a live show performer at Kings Island in 1990 in a show called It's Magic. She was also brought in and inducted into the Kings Island Hall of Fame. So a lot going on that weekend.
Yeah, totally. So let's start with Pete Rose and George Foster. So, you invited them there. How did that come together?
There's a guy that I had known for a long time, kind of worked as, I guess, a booking agent for Pete Rose and some of the other members of the Cincinnati Reds. His name was Charles Soto, and he had reached out to me multiple times about, if there's ever an opportunity to bring some of these guys in for an appearance. So I had that contact, and we were looking for something to do. Bring guests to the park Labor Day weekend. That year there weren't any new rides or anything like that, so it was all about special events. There was money left over in the budget as we got to Labor Day, and it was like, okay, maybe now's the time to bring Pete Rose in, let's do a Q&A with him. So I reached out to Charles, and Pete was available that weekend, so we were able to bring him in. And as a bonus, he said, would you like George Foster too? We can get him. So George came in as well, and we set it up, and it's Kings Island Theater, and did it as a Q&A show. No questions were off limits for Pete Rose. So we wanted to make that clear, that whatever questions anyone had, Pete was going to have to be willing to answer.
Yeah. Pete Rose is kind of an unpredictable character in a lot of ways. How was he to work with?
It's interesting with Pete. Okay, there's two things about Pete Rose you got to know. He loves two things. He loves baseball, and he loves Pete Rose. So you got to get that part straight right there. Behind the scenes, the first thing, and I had worked with Pete when I was working for hockey teams at the Cincinnati Gardens. We had brought him in for appearances there. But when you pick Pete up, whether it's at the airport, the hotel, he's got his hand out. He wants his money right away before you do anything else. So that was no different. I experienced that with the Cincinnati Mighty Ducks. Same thing at Kings Island. All right, where's my money? A little bit restless, I guess, in the green room, whatever you want to call it, behind, backstage, looking at his watch, just, you could tell he just, I just want to get through this kind of a thing. But as soon as he goes on stage, and I've seen it multiple times with Pete Rose, it's like the light goes on, and he just, this different persona comes out, and he knows how to entertain, knows how to answer questions, and knows how to put on a show. And he put on a great show.
Yeah, he did. Did he do any like advanced media interviews or anything like that?
That was part of the package that, we had him go on like WOW Sports Talk to talk about, him being there, and had him available before the Q&A, Cincinnati Enquirer, Cincinnati Post was still around at the time, to have them do some interviews with them. So yeah, he was available for that. And then, with the media, he was always great with the media.
Yeah. So George Foster, he was a big slugger in the 70s. How was he to deal with?
Consummate professional.
Really?
Great guy. Yeah. Just, talk to him, extensively, backstage before the Q&A. And then, years later, I would see George, there was a thing in Montgomery. It was called the Green Diamond Gallery, where they'd bring in all these baseball players not to do speaking. He was a member of that. So I would see him there, and, he remembered me from Kings Island. And like I said, just a consummate professional, nice guy, superstar player, but just down to earth.
Yeah, I always thought that was like so interesting that not only were you able to get Pete Rose, but you got George Foster, which was really kind of cool. But it wasn't just baseball that weekend; it was also the Brady Bunch. So you had Barry Williams, Mike Lookinland, Susan Olsen. How did that come to be?
I had been asking since I got there in 2007 as the PR manager to bring in the Brady Bunch for an appearance. I knew that would sell tickets.
Mm-hmm.
Not just pass holders coming, but it would sell tickets. People would come from throughout the region if they knew the Brady Bunch was going to be there with enough time. And I kept getting told, no, nobody's going to care. They've been off the air for 30 something years. No. Um, but I kept going back to my years as a pass holder, being in line to ride the racer, ride the beast, and riding the racer, rode it over, 10,000 times in the 80s. And there would be people almost every time that you're going through the queue, they'd be telling their friends or their family or their kids, this is the ride that was featured on the Brady Bunch. So people were still talking about it. They were still relevant to the Kings Island guest. So I knew if we could bring them in, it would still work. So I kept trying to sell that. And then as we got toward the end of the year, the marketing director and the general manager, they approached me and they said, okay, you've done a good job for us. We got some money left over. Go ahead and reach out and see if you can bring in some of the Brady Bunch actors. Here's how much money we have to spend. See if that'll work. And then they told me to round up my friends because outside of my friends and family, that's the only people that were going to be in the theater to see this. So they totally dismissed it. Didn't think it was going to be a big deal. They thought, there might be a couple hundred people in there. Well, we opened the gates and there's guests. They're dressed in their 70s attire. They've got their, books and photo out, all these, just all kinds of Brady Bunch memorabilia. They line up. We had, I think it was 4 Q&A shows, but they line up right away. So it's like 10:15, 10:30, and it's a couple hours still before the first Q&A show. And the line is already, stretched out, goes way beyond from the Kings Island Theater, past the front gate. It's wound around by La Rosa's. Nobody's, ready for this. So I take a picture and I have to send it back to the GM and, the marketing director, and I said, here you go, naysayers, what do you think about this? They were surprised. First show, standing room only. All right, well, let's see what it does the next show. Standing room only. Third show, standing room only. And then during the 4th show, I go up to the general manager and I said, so what do you think about bringing the Partridge Family in next year? Kind of grabs my tie. We had to wear the ties back in that day, and just like, no, lightning in a bottle you got for this, but we're not going to try this twice. But they brought, they came back again in 2013, same thing, standing room only crowd. So that was kind of, it kind of really helped me when I would pitch ideas, that they would listen now because, obviously he knows what he's talking about because the Brady Bunch works. So that really helped me moving forward.
Yeah. So not only with that, that weekend you had Carmen Electra, which is a Kings Island alumni. She came to the park and she performed, kind of made a cameo in the 80s show. So
and, she came out on the stage, didn't really, dance around or anything too much. She was a dancer in a show called It's Magic in 1990. And so we wanted her to come back. And part of that was a Q&A with the cast after each of the shows. And, they would be on stage and they would ask her questions about, giving advice, how to pursue their dreams of performing on stage or getting into the movies or anything like that. And the crowd seemed very entertained by it.
Yeah. I remember it being interesting. She seemed to be marginally grateful to be there and stuff. And
she was appreciative. Yeah. She was appreciative of it. And trying to, when her name came up in that weekend, she was also put into the Kings Island Hall of Fame. How do we get a hold of her?
Yeah.
But she, she grew up in Harrison, Ohio. So it wasn't that difficult to, find the family members and to track her down. And when she was approached about it, I mean, she was excited to be able to come back home, see her family, see her friends, get inducted into the Hall of Fame. Now, she was only there, in the shows for maybe 3 or 4 weeks. It wasn't there long, but, she was a name that, people associated with working at Kings Island when they would do those stories on famous people that worked at Kings Island. She was always one of the first ones they mentioned.
Oh, yeah. Probably the biggest name. I mean, and then you've got the obscure fact that Woody, is it Harrelson? Is
Woody
that the guy,
Harrelson.
the right Woody? Yeah. He worked at the park too, but so she seemed to be pretty easy to work with. But so opportunities like this made a lot of sense, because you had it for the 35th and the 40th anniversary of the Cincinnati Kids episode airing. Why didn't you do? I know they brought in Greg Brady for one day. Why didn't they do more stuff like this for the 50th anniversary in 2022?
I wanted to, but you had a changeover in personnel at the park from the time that we had brought them in 2008, 2013, and
Yeah.
I would be told they're not relevant. It's been 50 years since they were on the air. So you'd get that again, and but if you're out in the park and you're talking to your guest, you're in line to ride the racer. You still hear those same conversations today. So it's just really getting to know who your guests are, and what they'd be interested in, and it would have worked. It would have done the same thing. It would have sold out. Stand room only crowds again for 3 or 4 Q&A shows in the Kings Island Theater. So I think it still would have been very successful. But there just wasn't any. It was quickly dismissed. When I brought that up for the 2023 season last year to do something with them for the 50th anniversary of the airing of that episode. But back to Pete Rose real quick. Something fun I wanted to do with him.
Yeah.
And he would have been up for it. But I was just kind of told, no, don't do that. I thought it would have been great for our YouTube channel at the time, which was just being launched. I wanted to take him up to the Eiffel Tower and have him sitting there and have somebody walk up to him and say, "What are you doing, Pete?" And he just points out to the racer and just, saying, I'm betting on which side's going to win. I thought that would have been a lot of fun. I think Pete would have had fun with that, but that was kind of nixed. They were like, "Nah, don't do that."
Yeah, I guess they didn't want to inject the controversy or thought people might not get it if they live under a rock. But yeah, very,
It would
very
have been fun
interesting.
though. But it was a fun time, and we had a great team in the marketing department, and you talk about one team efforts. I mean, nothing was more of a one team effort in that 2008 season. Not just the marketing team, but the whole park, putting together events like Robbie Knievel's motorcycle jump, and how everybody had to come together to pull that off quickly. And you had Rick did a skywalk that year, and how quickly everybody had to come together, for that. But no new attraction that year. The entertainment lineup had, the one show. So there wasn't a whole lot going on in the park except for the existing attraction. So you had to come up with these different events every couple of weeks, find a way to give pass holders and guests a reason, to come back or a reason to come. And I think that was probably, if you ask anybody that worked at the park for a long time, they would point to 2008 as one of the years that was the most rewarding for them, because everybody came together as one. We made a lot of things happen, sold a lot of tickets.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to the listener question. The first one is from Asher. He says, "What's your favorite part of International Street that's not the Eiffel Tower?" That's a great question. Why don't you go first?
Not the Eiffel Tower, it's the Royal Fountain.
Really?
The Royal Fountain, yeah. I think it's just, picturesque. I can sit there by the fountain, just kind of relax and just sit there. I mean, it's just the atmosphere. I think it just plays a lot into International Street. It's not the same without the fountain to me. It would not be the same. What about you?
I agree. Honestly, there's a hidden little gem that is one of my favorite spots in the park, and that is if you go out of Grater's Ice Cream and you make an immediate right, there's some outdoor seating there that's kind of shaded by a couple
Oh, yeah.
trees. I love that spot because you're in the middle of all the action being on International Street, but you're off the path. So that's a great place to like chill out and stuff. Like, me and my friends have sat there for hours sometimes just hanging out and talking and stuff on a busy day, and waiting for the fireworks to get ready and all that stuff. So
That's a great spot.
yeah.
Now, because you mentioned it, it's going to be a crowded spot.
I know I shouldn't have admitted that or my Boo Blasters trick. I'm gonna have a lot of regrets this season.
Now we got another question that comes from Casey Wade Johnson. It says, "I'm still going through the Attractions Group podcast." That's our other podcast that Ryan and I do. It says, "To see if you answered this, but how did both of you get to meet each other and go from what I assume was a professional relationship to friends and now podcast business partners? Seems like it would be a unique journey, and I can tell you that yes, it has."
Okay, well, let's break down the question. Our professional relationship has always been toxic. I would never be your business partner, and I'm certainly not your friend. Okay, well, okay. So our story, it's rather complex, to be honest with you, because Don worked in hockey and was involved in Kings Island. I was a big fan of the Cincinnati Mighty Ducks, the team that he worked for. So before I was involved in Kings Island, I used to have season tickets, and I was a couple rows in front of the broadcast booth at the Gardens. and I knew who you were as the announcer, and I knew that there was a guy that rode the racer a lot, but I never made that connection. And then if I recall, I I saw you around the park and stuff. I mean, I saw you around the park, but I didn't see you as the Mighty Ducks guy. So like I never drew that connection. But it was like 2006. We were doing a live hits for Nickelodeon Universe. Yeah, Nickelodeon Universe at the time. 'Cause remember, it was Central and then it was Universe. And Maureen Kaiser, who was a PR person at the time, this is before you worked there. She invited me and Dane and a couple of KI Central people out. And then I guess she just invited you. And I remember you had your daughter Maria with you, who was probably like, what, 12 or so at the time. And if you recall,
10 or 11, yeah.
Yeah. So she was really young, but it rained all day. So there was a lot of like hurrying and waiting. And we found a baseball like somewhere. It was probably from the fast pitch game, but those like hadn't even opened yet. It was, I think we found it like in a planter or something, and we were under the shelter of like where it's kind of where Camp Snoopy or Beagle Scout Acres is going to be now. It was under that shelter. I remember tossing that around, and then every once in a while there'd be a break in the storm and Maureen would be like, oh my god, Fox 19's going live, get on Avatar The Last Airbender or whatever. But as we were walking out after this long ass day, you came up and started talking to me. And you were like, yeah, I like your work on the site. And I'm just like, okay, thanks. Because when I did KIC, I'm never comfortable with people really coming up to me of like, like, hey, I like your work. I want you to like the work. Like, I want you to like this podcast. You don't have to like me. I always thought that was weird that people would associate me with like the pictures I took because I'm not a camera. So I kind of blew it off. And you're like, yeah, when I work for the Mighty Ducks, I was like, oh, I know who you are. And then we stayed in contact. And not long after you moved to Albany, New York.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I remember we would email back and forth occasionally. And I sent like a kind of semi-joking email to you about like, are we ever going to do those Rail Raider things? The Cincinnati Rail Raiders were a failed hockey team that, was going to be at the Gardens. And you were like, no, that's probably not going to happen. But hey, if you're looking for something, the Junior Cyclones are looking for a team and I'm going to be doing their PR. And I'm like, okay, cool. I get to work with this guy. And then you moved. So I didn't work with you. And then we stayed in contact after that. And I remember somebody within the park, and I'm not going to dox anybody. They were like, because Maureen had left. And they were like, do you know who the new PR person is? And I was like, no. And they were like, it's Don Helbig. And I was like, I remember I emailed you and I was like,
I'm still in Albany at the time.
You were in Albany. And I remember I emailed you and I was like, Don, do you have something to tell me? And you had some smart response. Like, yeah, I saved a lot of money by switching to Geico or something.
Yes, yeah. I remember I emailed. I remember that now. Yeah. You sent me the email and you said, is there anything, you want to tell me, anything I should know? And I said, yes, I saved 15% of my car insurance by switching to Geico.
And then I think I replied back with, "Oh yeah, well I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express." Both were relevant jokes at the time. I promise you they were relevant. Yes. But yeah, then you came on to Kings Island, and I remember one of your first weeks, you had me in to discuss like what the relationship with KIC was going to be like, and we worked from there. And we did a lot of like legendary stuff. Like it's easy to like forget about certain things because you were at the park so long and I was doing KIC so long that every once in a while we'll come up like, yo, our best work was when we tried to fool people into thinking the racer was going away. Or do you remember when we got people all pumped up for Banshee and stuff? But like there was a lot of good synergy there and it was funny because you had it pretty decent where you could use me to get this message out, but I was connected enough that you didn't have to tell me anything you weren't allowed to tell me. Like I always figured it out. Like there's enough leakers. I didn't need you, so so by the time I came to you and I was like, well, I remember distinctly. So for those who
now, you got to admit this too, Ryan, I never leaked anything to you. I would never confirm anything. I would just kind of dance around it. So we never had that where you were getting any scoops on anything. But
no, you never told me anything.
Yeah, we had fun trying to to enhance things? Let's just put it that way, for like an announcement. How can we amplify this?
Yeah, I bet you dollars to donuts that I mean, maybe since you had rapport with the people you worked with, they assumed you wouldn't do it, but all like the in the enthusiast community always assumed that I knew stuff because you were telling me. But you didn't. But I knew how to press your buttons too, though, because I would hear stuff and it would be like not a verifiable thing. And let me give you an example. This is so I guess I'll say this because it doesn't matter anymore. But people were telling me that the new ride's going to be called Banshee, and I was like, they did that and they punted on it at Cedar Point. Like I don't think that. So
Yeah.
I was like, I'll ask Don. But I couldn't come up to you and say, "Is it going to be Banshee?" There's no way in hell you tell me that. It was. I came up to you and I said because they were clearly building a new coaster. Like we're not idiots. But I was like, yeah, have you guys picked a name yet? And you're like, yeah, we're floating around a lot of stuff, like a no answer. And I was like, please tell me you're not making the mistake of calling it Banshee. And you're like, well, what's wrong with Banshee? And I was like, that's the name. So I knew exactly how that would work.
Yeah. The other thing about that too, Ryan, is I knew that, where KI Central was at the time, was a place that the members of the news media would look
Yeah.
whenever there was any kind of teasers going on with Kings Island or anything happening at Kings Island. They would, right away go to KI Central and see what people were talking about, or just to see if they could find a story there with something that
Mhm.
somebody was talking about. It could be as simple as somebody. I was at Kings Island the other day and I got stuck on the Beast Hill for 10 minutes. Where they would call and say, "Can you talk about what happened with the beast?" Somebody reported they were stuck 10 minutes. Now, those were the things that you and I would talk about, and I would tell you that I didn't really appreciate the site for that kind of problem, that it was creating. But at the same time, because of that situation where it was attracting, the media's attention, what was being discussed there, I was smart enough as a PR person to leverage that. And I knew that if I had KI Central talking about stuff through you, with what you
Mhm.
would be able to do to kind of amplify it, and then that moved on to where social media started talking about it because KI Central was talking about it. Well, then
Right.
that was certainly going to make the media even more interested than they would have been before because now everybody's talking about it. So it just made my job that much easier when I would call the media and say, "Hey, we're announcing something tomorrow," or they would see so much buzz about it already. Well, they got to cover it.
Mhm.
So it really was a great partnership that way.
I agree. I think that the coolest thing that actually like kind of came back to us rather than the media seeing it, and because we didn't always see like that channel 5 or whatever was watch looking at the website. But do you remember when I had the decoding 2014 thread in 2013 when we were speculating about it, and then Yahoo News, which at the
Hmm.
time was relevant, ran a piece saying like fan site speculates about new roller coaster at Kings Island in Cincinnati with a like 10,000 page thread, and it linked to the thread from Yahoo News.
Oh yeah.
Like, so that like benefited us both because not only was, oh, it's interesting, there's a lot of buzz, which came to us, but also like, well, what are they talking about? You know?
Yeah, and when
So,
you're a one-man band, which I was during the years that I did PR at Kings Island, it was just me. I remember the years I was riding the racer, they'd have as many as four sometimes that were
right.
full-time PR people. So it was just one. You need different, to leverage different resources and that to really help you amplify what you're doing
Yeah.
and to bounce story ideas, off of and just find ways to, make that story feel important. And, you know, working with you and partnering with, Brad Purdue and others with KI Central, that really helped enhance, what I was doing as the PR person's part because you guys were helping, get that word out there.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's very easy to fall into the trap of KIC is bad for the park because all they do is bash the park, which is not true. Well, we've talked on the internet. I mean, we talked on previous episodes of the internet works a certain way. Positive comment, positive comment, positive comment. One person says something slightly negative, and then the whole conversation is negative.
Yeah.
But
Well, there's a
you
lot of keyboard warriors out there, and they'll
oh
say a bunch of
yeah,
things on social media or on a KI Central that they would never think about saying if they saw you in the park, face to face about something. So,
if they said
uh,
something to you like they post on KIC or on Facebook, they'd be unhinged. They'd be arrested. But
one of the greatest things about that, let's talk about the keyboard warriors. When Mystic Timbers was announced,
mhm.
I remember one specific individual was just so adamant that the park had made a huge mistake, waste of space. Whoever decided to put in Mystic Timbers should be fired. All this kind of stuff. Well,
I agree.
I saved those little, things that I knew that as soon as this individual rode Mystic Timbers, it was, if not their favorite ride in the park, it was definitely going to be one of their favorite rides. And, I remember media day, they're riding it over and over again. So I asked them how they liked it, and oh, it's fantastic. It's my new favorite ride, my number one wooden coaster. But that wasn't what you were saying on social media the night we announced it.
I
So
mean,
I would have fun with those kind of things, just being able to look back and like, okay, well, we're going to see what you say after you ride it. So that's one of the things too. I just wish whenever the park would do something, just wait until you experience it, before going off on the internet about something, because 95% of the time or more, you end up loving what you're complaining about the time it was announced.
sure. Yeah, and we're all guilty of it. And an example, a more recent example I can bring up is, they it leaked out that they had done they were going to do the Gazillion Bubbles show, and I was talking about it on KI Central. And but I can say that with authority because I had seen the show before. But
Yeah, I had too.
I always caveated it with, I did see it 10 years ago, and who knows, what's changed since then, or maybe I'll feel differently. I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna see it the first day it's there, of course, you know. Um, but for me, yeah, what my opinion going in, and I guess we can quote this because I'm certain we'll do an episode on this because you and I will probably watch that show. Um, is it's a grown man blowing bubbles, and it's horribly boring for 20 minutes, and then the ending has lasers and bubbles going everywhere and stuff, and it's awesome. So maybe knowing that going in and seeing the show, I'll feel differently, but nonetheless,
Yeah.
yeah, it's better than nothing, and that's what we were kind of afraid we might get in that
Yeah.
theater.
Now we went off track a little bit from the question, but other times, Ryan and I have gone to a lot of Cincinnati Reds games together.
Yeah,
We did the Cincinnati Thunder hockey games together. I did the play-by-play, and Ryan would add his expert commentary. I remember, I always remember this. Ryan, just made one time just to show why he was the best color guy in the league. He says, "I tell you what, Don, the goalie doesn't stop that shot; it's in the net."
yeah. Well, I had a lot of insights like if the goalie doesn't stop that shot, it's in the net. Or you're right, Don. If the other team outscores the Thunder, they will lose this game.
Yes, but we had fun doing the Thunder games, and we had fun going to the Reds games. We made a road trip to St. Louis to see the
Oh,
St.
yeah.
Louis Blues play. We were able to get tickets from the St. Louis Blues. He was assistant coach at the time there, Brad Shaw, who had been the head coach with the Cincinnati Mighty Ducks, and got to go down after the game in the players area and that, and talk to
That was
Brad a little
cool.
bit. Went to Casey, Illinois, not
World's
intentionally.
largest wind chime.
Yeah,
I wish you
yeah,
told me you were going to mention that. I put up a graphic.
yeah, to see the world's largest wind chime. So we've had some fun experiences together, and we've had a lot of we're both got our own opinions about different things and stuff, and we battled about those things over the years. But it's really been a lot of fun, and I love what I'm doing now. Doing these podcasts with Ryan. I think all the
Yeah.
different things that I've done in my career. This is
Mhm.
one of the most fun things that I've done is working with Ryan doing Tower Topics and the Attractions Group podcast.
Yeah, I tell you what, Don, I things have changed a lot for the podcast because I've always enjoyed doing it, but there was always like that time when it would get to be like 5, 6 o'clock, and I got to start setting that stuff up. But since like AGP has really kind of gotten traction, and we very often have guests and stuff, and it's not like, okay, what do you want to talk about this week? And we've got to be creative about what we talk about. And plus, like with the chains kind of off with you not working at Kings Island anymore, I've really come around to like just really looking forward to that. In Tower Topics, I like doing even more than AGP, even though AGP's been our baby for almost 2 years now. Tower Topics is so natural to us. There are
Yeah,
times, I mean,
we'll spend time on Attractions Group podcast, putting it together with the pick
mhm.
six and researching the different stories and that. This one we just turn on record and we go.
Yeah, it's I mean, often we don't even like, I mean, sometimes we have like notes and stuff. Like, I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, this episode is about a lot of stuff that happened in 2008. So we have a note, and Don listed all the stuff that happened and so on. But there's no script or anything. It's just for reference. But it's very easy to do for us, especially. And it's not just that we're knowledgeable; we're very passionate about it too.
Yeah,
My
and
favorite
we're
part of
gonna
the
have.
show.
Yeah, go ahead. Your favorite part?
My favorite part of the show is the listener question. By the way, I
Yeah,
love
and
how we do those.
I do too. And there's some fun things that we're just barely scratching the surface on what Tower Topics is going to be. There's a lot of fun things that we have planned and want to do. And same thing with the Attractions Group podcast. We're talking about like having meetups and doing some live shows, in some locations around Cincinnati and that. So there's a lot of upside potential here for us, and we're real excited about it. But the show, we say it at the beginning, it's by a couple of Kings Island fans, for Kings Island fans. We do not, we're not here to serve the park. We're here to serve you, the fans of the park.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it's when we like it, we'll say it. If we don't, we won't. So it's nice to be able to do that. But thank you for asking that question. I think we might have gone over how we met in the first episode of AGP, but I wouldn't recommend going back to that because that's when we were just little baby podcasters and we didn't know what we were doing. But essentially the whole story.
We didn't even know we had to turn on the sound when we were recording.
Did we really make that mistake?
I think we did one time. I think
we made the mistake.
We got to record again because we didn't have any audio. I remember that.
No, it was when we had Matthew Miller from Orlando Informer on. I did not record his audio. So anytime it cut to him, it was nothing. And then thank God he's like the nicest guy ever. And he's like, oh, sure, we'll do it again tomorrow. And it's like,
you mentioned listener questions. And if you want us to take one question and talk for 45 minutes about it, like we've done here, just tweet them at us. It's called X, but I'm still going to say tweet. So tweet it at us at Tower_Topics. Anything that you have in mind about the park, anything you want to know, just fire away, and we'll try to find a way to get it on the show.
Awesome, cool. Hey, I'm Ryan Sir, along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.